Welcome to The Rec Room with Mandy and Mio, a podcast about books and the people who write them. I closed my eyes. Things and people moved around me, taking positions in obscure hierarchies, participating in systems I didn't know about and never would. A complex network of objects and concepts. You live through certain things before you understand them. You can't always take the analytical position. Come and get me, I said. And to think, this all started out as conversations with friends. Hey. So,
what's up, everyone?
Welcome. This is the first
Welcome. I'm
ever
Mandy.
episode.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Sorry.
I
I'm
just
getting
wanted to
ahead of
talk about
myself.
myself.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah.
Sorry, who are you again? Who are you?
I'm Mandy. Are you and you?
I am Mio. And this is the first episode of The Rec Room.
The Rec Room.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
So
said that at the same time.
what is The Rec Room? What is this? What are we doing?
Well, basically, it's a what are we doing?
Well, it's a podcast, that's for sure.
This is basically it's clearly a podcast because I can't see you right now. Can you see me? 'Cause that would be creepy.
No, you're a disembodied voice.
Hey,
But
God.
The Rec Room.
Basically, this is a podcast that is blank check, but for books.
Yes.
You guys are listeners of the other podcast, Blank Check.
Yes, Blank Check with Griffin and David. We're big fans of it, and we wanted to do a podcast that was essentially like Blank Check for books. But there's a lot of ways you can go about it, and we kind of talked about it before we started recording this podcast. And we settled on like a main question that we wanted to answer, because Mandy and I, we both studied at the same university. We studied at the same program, which is how we became best friends. And Indeed. The whole time, part of our
you were
experience,
my teacher at one point.
Well, teaching assistant, but that's beside the point.
Yeah, teaching assistant.
But the whole idea was that we had a lot of common readings that we had to each parse through, and I would kind of hand them down to you and say, well, this is the whole point of this and that. And you would argue with me. No, you wouldn't. But the whole idea is that we had a common canon of readings, which I think we both kind of came into with different points of view. And I think from there we started to develop this idea or this question of what constitutes then as required reading, especially since a lot of the books that we were reading back then were like classics. So, everyone who went to our university read Homer, they read Dante, they read Shakespeare. But, very little was said about contemporary writing and contemporary authors. And if you wanted to get a sense of who was
Unless you were in our program.
Yeah. If you wanted to get a good sense of who was good in contemporary writing, you had to actually get into a conversation with a friend, as it were. But that didn't really do anything for like the larger, I guess, student population or academic community.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, that's kind of the idea that we want to broach in this podcast, which is what are the things that can make someone's work be considered as required reading? And to do that, we're trying to look into the intersection between what breaks out into the mainstream and what appeals into traditional literary sensibility. So how do we do that?
Yep.
Mandy, how do we do that?
Okay, so basically what we're going to be doing here, guys, is that we're going to choose an author who like fits into like literary popularity or like it, not necessarily mainstream, but if they're mainstream, that's cool too.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to go through the author's work every week. So it's essentially one piece of work every week. We're going to try and do almost every novel if they have a lot of novels.
Yeah.
So this first series in particular, though, we have some novels and then a short story. So
right. So we figured out like 3 miniseries, 3 authors so far, and we've kind of mapped out how they fit into this narrative of of mainstream literary popularity, that sort of question, and like the different angles in which they came into that, right? So for this
Indeed.
first miniseries, for our opening episode of The Rec Room, as you will have already seen based on the title of this episode, we have chosen to cover the books of one Irish writer named Sally Rooney. Yes, Sally Rooney.
If you don't know who Sally Rooney is at this point, specifically, literally this.
Literally. You're like literally.
Like this point in time, like you have been under the biggest rock for sure.
A big ass rock.
A big ass rock. That's true. So because she recently broke into mainstream, right? Because of her second novel, which was made into a literal miniseries.
Yes.
In the UK and Ireland. I'm gonna be, good about that.
We're Filipino.
Yeah, we're Filipino, so like, please.
We're sorry.
There's a lot that we still don't know. We're sorry. Yeah. We're so sorry.
We're very ignorant. I mean, not that Filipinos are ignorant in general, but we're.
Yeah, but we.
Well, but we in particular, we're specifically the most. We're ignorant Filipinos.
We're probably
Anyway, Normal People.
So Normal People was her second novel, right? It was her second novel, and it broke into the mainstream because of this miniseries that basically broke the internet because of how crazy the scenes were. Apparent. I mean, like it was a beautifully shot miniseries.
Well, the series, the series is starring Paul Mescal and Daisy Edgar Jones. Yeah, and like I remember reading that book the last time I was. So Mandy and I live in different islands in the Philippines, and the last time I was visiting you, I started reading Normal People.
Yeah, and you had literally bought it.
Yeah, I was like, okay, so it sounds like this book is gaining traction. I want to figure out what's the whole thing behind it. And I remember when I had visited you over there, I basically, there was a day where I was hanging out with my cousin, and I had just bought the book. And I started reading it in front of her. And then a few weeks ago, she messaged me to say, hey, I just watched Normal People. It's such a good series. I can't wait to read the book. And then I said to her, hey, do you remember I was reading the book last time we were hanging out in person? And she couldn't believe it. Like, she had not noticed at all. Which I think to me was like the sign, like, oh, okay, like it definitely broke out somewhere. Yeah.
I similarly, like, I remember when you had the book, you were getting through it pretty quickly, and not necessarily in a bad way, but like, I remember you being like, I really like this, and she's a pretty cool writer, and I like this what she's talking about here, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting, and like I had that in the back of my head because obviously everything you tell me in terms of like what you're reading and stuff, like I tend to remember. And then when the show came out, or like when the trailers or something came out for it, or it premiered on the internet, and we were in quarantine already, I remember just being like, oh, what the hell? Because suddenly everyone was like, and then I remember you and I sent each other, we sent each other like reviews. Like I remember I sent you the one from the Paris review because it was literally just a review that was, or you sent it to me. Either way, we had the link for their review, the Paris reviews review of the show. And then Vulture had they had like 3 separate articles about it, and one of them was just about the sex scenes.
Yeah.
So, and and so like, and then so suddenly there was so much Normal People content, and I was just like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like definitely it's
he
big.
was reading it.
Yeah. And like you were saying, it was quick for me to get through, and not in a bad way at all, because and this is something that we're definitely going to talk about today. There's something about Sally Rooney's style that is both simple, but it's very precise.
Yes.
I think it's worth mentioning that prior to the series coming out, she was already being heralded as like the first great millennial author, and that was like a title that she was given by the New York Times, no less, in 2018. I don't know if you've read.
So crazy.
There was an article I was reading by Emily Temple on LitHub where she was kind of challenging this notion of pigeonholing Sally Rooney as a great millennial author. And I mean, she was coming from it from a point of view where she's challenging it as a marketing term where people tend to revile millennials.
Right.
Which is, you know, obviously not a position that we have because we're millennials.
Yeah. Right. Okay. That only just made me realize now that the first great millennial author is like a backhanded comment.
Yeah, yeah.
Almost.
Which, like, to us, I mean, like, at least so far, this is the first time we're acknowledging that it could be backhanded. So for us, not
Right.
really. It wasn't. It was just kind of denoting where she was coming from. And she was like born 1991, so it's like really,
Yeah.
definitely like square
Yeah.
within the millennial time period, no?
Mhm.
So for us,
Yeah.
it's not really to say much except that she's from this era of people. Um, and I think the only question that comes out of that then is, does her writing then strike us as, you know, something timely or dated? Or does it have the potential to even be timeless?
Yeah.
So I think that's something that we're going to definitely
Right.
get into with that, with this whole
Yeah, and I think
miniseries.
sorry, to bounce
Mhm.
off that, like I think going back also to how we were all like aggressively saying how we're Filipino, like that plays into it as well. You know, like she is very Irish,
Yes.
and her stories tend to be very Irish, I think, but in the sense that, but it's not also, what do you call it? Like I don't feel necessarily distanced from it, even
Right.
in the TV show. Do you know
Because
what I mean?
we've both grown up consuming a lot of Western media and reading a lot of Western literature.
Yes.
So we're necessarily distanced from a lot of the things that we're reading about. Like I've never been to like a bit of context for those who don't know me. I spent a year studying in the UK, but I never once went to Ireland.
Right.
So for me, like to me, I had to really imagine or like look up places or get a sense
Yeah,
of what was being
same.
talked about in terms of like the
Right.
specific sensory like things that she was writing about, no?
Right.
So why don't we let's get a bit into the context of where Sally Rooney is coming from as she enters this book, or as we enter this book rather. So she was born in Castlebar, County Mayo, which is on the western side of Ireland, and that's where she grew up. So that's on the opposite side of Ireland from where Dublin is. Her father worked in
Okay.
her father worked in telecommunications, and her mother ran an art center. And then she eventually studied English at Trinity College Dublin, and she was an elected scholar in 2011, which is regarded as like the most prestigious undergraduate award in the country.
Oh, the country.
Yeah. It's actually pretty interesting. I was like looking it up, and
Oh wow.
like they have to take like a voluntary exam to qualify for the
Wow.
scholarship, which is like, at least to us, like unheard of. Like we've never
Yeah.
like they just
Yeah.
normally give you the scholarship,
Yeah.
which is, you know, pretty
I
interesting.
mean, obviously you have to have like the grades for it.
Yeah,
But, like
exactly.
if you pass like even just the college exam,
Yeah, I
and
guess
your
it's like
grades
the
are good, you're
yeah, that's like the
qualified for a
closest thing. It's like if you take like in our cases, if you took a college entrance exam and you scored particularly high, then you would qualify for a scholarship, I think, in some cases.
Right.
But like
Yeah.
for them to already be in the school and then to be like, yeah, I'll
Yeah.
take this test just to get the school to consider paying me to study, you know? Like that
Yeah.
was not a thing here.
Yeah.
So from there, she went on to take a master's program in politics, which she did not complete, and she instead switched degrees so that she could complete
Oh wow.
a degree in American literature, which she received in 2013. So while she was in university, she was a competitive debater. And she was, in fact,
That
the
makes
top.
a lot of sense.
Yeah, she was the top competitive debater in Europe around the time of her graduate studies. And she wrote an essay
Wow.
about it in 2015 entitled Even If You Beat Me, which appeared in the Dublin Review. In terms of politics, she describes herself as a Marxist. And then in 2015, she was working an administrative job at a restaurant. She had been writing failed novels ever since she was a teen, and she had managed to get in a few publications. So her essay, which she got in the Dublin Review, was like her biggest one. And her other big publication was a story that she had gotten into an anthology edited by Kevin Barry and Olivia Smith. This story was seen by the person who would then become her agent, Tracy Bohan of Wiley Agency, who then got in touch with her to see if she had anything else in the works. So at the time, Sally Rooney already had a draft of Conversations with Friends ready, but it was over like 100,000 words long, which, like, I mean, I've worked on novel manuscripts, and like 100,000 words is really long. That's like...
Oh, is it?
That's already like 500 pages or 400, 500 pages on Microsoft Word. So,
okay.
So, like, you know, she clearly needed to cut stuff out.
Yeah.
And she thought that was kind of shoddy, so she didn't really send anything for ages. But the email from the agent kind of gave her permission to quit her job at the restaurant. So, knowing that she kind of had that to fall back on, she quit her job very dramatically, she would say in an interview, and then she started working on the draft again. So apparently she like walked into work one day, and then she saw there was like a note on her desk about the things she had to do that day, and she didn't like the tone of the note, so she kind of just like dramatically walked out and then
she was like, I quit.
Yeah, she was like, I quit. And then later she was like, I could have just sent them an email. I don't know why I won't.
Yeah. Sally.
If only all of us could do that.
I know. Low key.
Right. So she was working on the draft again until March 2016. And then she sent it over to the agent. And then they signed on. And by April, she was already able to sell the book for publication in 12 countries. And it was finally published in June of 2017 by Faber and Faber. The book, Conversations with Friends, was nominated for the 2018 Swansea University International Dylan Thomas Prize and the 2018 Folio Prize.
Awesome.
And it won the 2017 Sunday Times Peter Fraser and Dunlop Young Writer of the Year Award. So already, like, from the get-go, there are all these talks about Sally Rooney being this next big thing.
Yeah.
That being said, we should get into the book.
I know. I'm
kind
of excited now.
Yes, me too. So, Conversations with Friends. Yeah, like it's... Wait, sorry, you were going to say something?
No, I was just going to say, because it's like, now knowing those things about like the development of it and like what eventually happened, like that kind of makes more sense to me.
Right.
Like, the book.
Yeah, because she's like, I think when I found out that she used to be a debater, that made sense.
Yeah.
Reading like the Bobby character in this book, who we'll talk about in a bit, but there's a character in this book who essentially is good at debating as well.
Yep.
So, not to say that she necessarily projected herself into Bobby, but like it's one of those things where like you write what you know, and like, you know, she put it into another character, which is cool. I feel like it should go without saying we're gonna like go hard into spoiling this book if you haven't figured it out already from the opening where I read the ending lines of the book. But we're gonna go deep into it. So let's start talking about the book. So the book is about 4 people. There's Francis, there's Bobby, there's Nick, and Melissa. And the book literally starts with Francis and Bobby meeting Melissa.
Like meeting, yeah.
Yeah. So wait, let's figure out. So Francis is basically the narrator of the novel. And Bobby is her best friend, and they're both spoken word poets. They perform together.
Right.
And the idea, sort of like the idea of their dynamic, I think what comes out right away is that Frances is the one who writes the
really
poems.
Quiet.
Yeah, she's quiet, and she's the one who writes the poems, while Bobby's very outspoken.
Yeah, she's like the face.
She's the face. And like
Frances, I mean, they both perform together. They do talk about like performing together all the time, but like Frances does always note that what she does is basically reactionary to what Bobby is gonna do.
Yeah, she kind of like feeds off of the energy of Bobby.
Yes.
Right. So it's during one of their spoken word performances that they meet Melissa, right? or basta
Yeah.
they meet Melissa at some point, and Melissa kind of just tells them like, okay, I want to do a profile on you guys. She's a writer. She's written some
Mm-hmm.
cool essays and like profiles on different people around
Yeah. And
Ireland,
she also
around
takes
Dublin. She
pictures.
takes
Like
pictures.
she's a very capable photographer as well, like
Yeah,
based on
yeah,
how Frances describes the photos and the
yeah,
fact that like it gets used also primarily in her own work. I think that says like I could imagine what these photos look like,
yeah.
you know.
So she wants to do this profile with them, which necessarily means that she'd have to get close to them. So she starts inviting them to her home, and that's how
Right.
they meet Nick, who is Melissa's husband,
Husband.
right? And like the whole idea is that, well, Bobby kind of hints like, oh, I'm kind of attracted to Melissa,
Melissa.
so I'm gonna try to see if I can make my move. And like Francis obviously feels very weird about that at first, but that's
Yeah,
gonna
she
turn
was like,
around super
they're
quickly.
married.
Yeah, yeah,
And Frances is like, so? And you're
yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay.
I think it's worth mentioning. Like, this is important to mention. Like, as a bit of context, also, Francis and Bobby used to be together as girlfriends
Oh,
when
yeah,
they were like
they
in
dated
high
in
school.
Catholic school.
Yes, they were in convent school. Um, and then they were together until like 16, or like right around the time they graduated is when they broke up.
Mm-hmm.
And like you can kind of see
But then
like
they.
mhm.
Okay, so sorry, go.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say like they kind of, you can kind of see how this is also stemming from their own relationships with their families. Like Frances is not very
Right.
close to her
Her
dad.
parents.
Like her relationship with her dad is actually a big thing that comes up in this book.
Right.
While with her mom, like she kind of respectfully disagrees with her mom, but in a way that's much more mature than her relationship with her dad.
With her dad. I mean, she's
Yeah,
clearly distant to both of them, but
yeah,
like in different ways.
yeah. In different ways, in different
Like
ways.
she's still really obviously more willing to see one than the other.
But
Like there's a bit
yeah,
right during like the first visit of Frances to her mom that we see like she has a conversation with her mom that's like her mom is like telling her to go because her parents live in separate houses
yes,
and her mom was like saying, "Are you gonna go see your dad while you're here?" And Frances literally was like, "No, I don't think so." And her
yeah,
mom was like disappointed in her
yeah.
for that. But then,
Yeah,
but
even
then
though they're
in like Frances's
divorced, they
head, she's
already
like,
separated.
"Yeah,
Yeah, you're supposed to hate
exactly."
him.
Yeah, and Frances literally couldn't understand it, and she was like, "I don't know." And then eventually, towards the end of that scene, she's like, "Yeah, okay, I'll go fucking see him." So she like takes a walk and sees him. But
Right.
when she goes to see him, they don't even really talk.
Yeah,
So
hardly,
there's that.
hardly.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you agree with this, but like it, to me it seemed like hinted that when these things between her parents were getting hinted, that was also around the time that she started getting closer to Bobby. And I kind of drew a connection between that to suggest
Right.
oh, the attention that she wasn't getting maybe from her parents was the
Yeah.
attention she kind of sought from Bobby, which I don't know if that's
Yeah.
not a generous take, but like I sense there might be a correlation between
I
those
mean,
relationships, those sense of
yeah,
relationships
and
she
I
had.
think you could say the same for Bobby as well because
Mhm.
Bobby obviously comes from not only is her family a bit bigger, but they're also wealthy.
Yes.
And they all but then, you know, her parents, Bobby's parents are still together, but they very clearly hate each other.
Yeah,
And
and they're like when the
Bobby has
book
made it known
starts, they're like in the middle of going through like this very
they're
ugly,
they're about to
messy
divorce.
separation, divorce, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it kind of
Yeah, and
lasts
like
throughout the entire novel.
yes, yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
And then you can also see how Bobby distances herself from her parents by calling them by their first names.
Yeah, yeah.
Which, by the way, is a Western concept that drives me insane. but like, I get it, you know.
Yeah.
So whenever Bobby talks about them, it just sounds like she's talking about like people she knows. From
Yeah,
school.
yeah,
Maybe. I don't know.
she's very much distance between them.
Jerry and like Eleanor, I think Eleanor is the mom.
Yes,
Am
it's funny when the dad's name was Jerry, I automatically went to Jerry from Rick and Morty.
Oh, well, that
It's
makes
like,
sense, but then
yeah,
he's meaner.
yeah.
Rick and
So
Morty Jerry is really
just
like a pathetic
he
guy,
just
and
sucks.
this, yeah, 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 and this Jerry is like an asshole. Like
Yeah.
he's horrible. I mean, we don't know. We actually never see them because obviously everything is in
Yeah.
point of
France's
view.
perspective, right?
But like, you know, of all the parts where Bobby talks about it, or when Francis talks about like stuff from their teenagehood or high schoolhood, you know, you can see that like it's a difficult relationship that
Right.
Bobby still has, regardless of them being together or not.
Yeah.
And quote unquote together.
Not to jump ahead too much, but like that's the interesting thing I think about this book compared to Normal People, because Normal People, she's dealing with those two characters from an like a removed third person perspective. So she can kind of like jump between their perspectives equally. Whereas this one, it's because it's in Frances' perspective, we're kind of trapped in her head. And I didn't realize that. Right. I didn't realize that until later on when Bobby mentions towards the end of the book, like, yeah, my parents are still going through their messy divorce. Like, right, we've totally forgotten about that because we've just been in Frances' head.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
So Frances and Bobby get to know Nick and Melissa, and Frances, like, there's a thing where I think in the first part of the book she's very much obsessed with this power dynamic that's going on, where Nick and Melissa are very clearly charmed by Bobby, and she wants to be liked just as much. So she kind of tries like sneaking her way into being liked by Nick, and this goes in the direction of them flirting until they start sleeping together.
Right.
Yeah.
They end up like emailing and going on like Messenger, I guess.
Yeah. It's funny that she specified that they were starting out by emails. Because I can't.
Yes.
I guess because we're Filipino.
Kind of places this. Yeah. I was gonna say, like, part of me is like this, and this is a conversation I've actually had with like cousins of mine.
Yeah.
Who have been like cousins of mine who grew up in the West, who've been like, oh yeah, we can just email. I'll just email you about this, or like I'll email you, and I'm like, why would you email me? You have my number, or like we're friends on Facebook, and you realize, oh, in other countries they don't really use Facebook as much as we do.
Right. Or like
not even Telegram.
Yeah, like I'll send you like 20 memes on Telegram, and you'll send me 20 memes back, like it's no problem.
Yeah, like it's not a. I'm expecting those 20 memes. Do not email me these memes.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that seems weird. I can't imagine like emailing someone just to let them see
and,
a
like,
meme.
Yeah, exactly. And even the parts where they're sending each other songs, they did that via email, if I'm if I remember correctly. And I remember just being like, you got linked a Spotify song like via email.
Wait, is there?
This is such a weird thing
I don't
want
to check,
but
is
again,
there
like,
is there an option
really bothered me.
when you share on Spotify? Is there an option for email? Because I know there's Copy Link, there's Facebook, there's Telegram.
No, I mean, like, exactly. They're probably just gonna. That means all this time they just copied link. You know,
that is
or
wild.
If it was a YouTube link, they also just copy link.
How their inboxes don't register it as spam, I'll never know.
I know. And again, like the fact that we're fixating on this is just, it's a cultural thing. I'm sorry, but
absolutely.
It really affected how I read their relationship, because I was like, this is so effort.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, emails here are for like your bosses or school.
Yeah.
You know?
We're very professional about it. You hardly ever like write an email to say, oh, look at this. Look at this meteor TikTok I watched.
Yeah.
No one's gonna do that here.
Or like being like, oh my gosh, have you seen this meme of Chris Evans today?
Not that this is topical for no reason. You've not mentioned that for any reason whatsoever. Anyway, so they get into their affair.
I was gonna say something else.
Sorry. Yeah, go on.
Oh, but I kind of forgot already.
Okay, never mind. So they keep quiet about
if I remember,
their.
I'll bring it up.
Okay, so they keep quiet about their affair, obviously. But Frances, like, while they're sleeping together, her feelings for Nick start to develop into something deeper. Nick is an actor. He's like a stage actor.
Oh, okay, that's what I wanted to say.
Okay, there you go.
I wanted to bring up how, literally, when we first started reading this, you did, and then you immediately were like, there is a character here who is basically, like, if they were to make a mini series about this as well, he could be played by this one actor that we had recently you and I had recently discovered because of the
yeah.
the Bridge Theaters
Who is not
production
Irish,
of
by the way.
he's an actor called Oliver Chris, who's like a fantastic actor.
Oliver,
so
I hope
good.
you're not listening
But, like,
to
yeah,
this
I know,
episode.
Ollie, I'm so sorry. And also Irish people in general. I'm
so sorry.
'cause Ollie
You don't
is
mean
not
to.
Oliver is not Irish. And like we're not trying to say that like we think that he would be this kind of person, because Nick is not. He's a very gray area person, you know.
Yeah.
And,
Like it's clear there's something happening under the surface more than just the cool exterior. Like he seems very cool at first and like almost like apathetic,
Chill,
but
charming.
it's like there is something definitely deeper going on emotionally.
Yeah, and like he's holding back something.
Yeah.
Like the wall is so visible.
And I think there's a thing, I don't know how, I forget how early on it is revealed in the novel, but you get the sense that in their relationship between Melissa and Nick, Melissa has also kind of taken advantage of Nick in a way that that has allowed her to take affairs. Yeah. So it kind of
yeah. The other thing that I wanted to mention also was that because of the emails and stuff, like one of the reasons why they get to email so frequently, even at night, is that Melissa and Nick don't even sleep in the same room.
Yeah. So it's clear there's a
house.
distance between the couple.
Yeah, and Bobby and what's this? And Francis both find out about that fact through the respective people they're trying to hit on.
Yeah.
And that kind of like that's meaningful to both of them. In different ways.
So they both see that as an opening. And honestly, I really expected Bobby to say that she was having an affair with Melissa too. But surprisingly, that does not happen at all. Okay, you didn't.
But you know, I didn't see it that way. I really was like, no, I feel like this is just going to be one of them.
Okay.
Because there's something about, I can't explain it, or maybe I'll realize how to later, but like there was something about Melissa, despite knowing eventually that she has had affairs before throughout the course of their marriage, and then one of the people that she had an affair with was like Nick's best friend,
right? Okay, yeah, that's true, because
like,
then they point out
for some reason it didn't click to me that it would be Bobby, if ever.
Yeah, but I remember at some point they point out that, you know, when they discover, oh, she did have an affair with the best friend, it kind of like makes her seem less likable even in Bobby's eyes. So Bobby's like, okay, I'm kind of good actually. While Francis and Nick are like, exactly. Whoops, we're getting into this.
Yeah.
But moving forward, like Frances definitely wants Nick to reciprocate sort of deeper feelings for her. Like she wants to be desired by Nick. She like really talks about
and she wants to hear it.
Yeah, she wants to hear it from him. She
really wants to verbally hear it.
Yeah, and things
because he's a very like in they're both actually very like the Tagalog word for it would be mahinhin.
Oh yeah,
the two of them are very mahinhin. She's very quiet, and so is Nick. Like when they're having sex,
which actually
tends to be quiet.
I mean, like I relate. I'm glad that you mentioned that quietness, because that quietness is something that I found myself relating to almost with Frances. Like,
no, I totally understand.
Yeah,
but like, the fact that she was so. I was really frustrated with Frances a lot.
She was demanding.
Why are you so demanding about these things? And part of that, I guess, is like I understand that it's supposed to be the point because she's like 21 and Nick is like 32.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm thinking maybe she like expects that like Nick has it figured out more because he's been married, older. So that might mean that he knows how to do these things, but clearly he doesn't.
And actually, that reveals like this crucial facet of her character, which is that her sense of herself kind of relies on other people. Like she really holds Bobby's estimation of herself in high regard. There was like this super funny line. Again, I also related to this. But there was a super funny line where I thought Bobby was so mean because she had emailed Frances like a picture of Angela Lansbury, and she was like, "This is your core demographic." and like she kept saying that Frances has no real personality, but that's also a compliment. I'm like, Bobby's just mean. But like that's something like I also saw like, oh, okay, yeah, her reliance on what other people say about her to get a sense of who she is. ends up becoming like a bigger thing in the novel, and that's something.
Yeah, that was something I also super noticed. Na parang she doesn't realize things about herself. Like there are parts that of where she's describing certain situations that were so insanely introspective.
Yes.
Like I kind of was like, this is a good thing to point out about yourself, but then you realize
she's very
like,
self-aware.
Yeah, she is self-aware, but that self-awareness doesn't come until something happens.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that. So
she's very millennial.
Yeah. And also, that was like, I think that was a huge thing or like a good thing to fixate on, to kind of remind yourself that she is still 21. Like, obviously, there were all these situations that were like, oh, I'm still in college, I'm paying for rent, I'm on financial aid. But then at the same time, it's like, she was going through things that were very just general life things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like having a crush on someone. And
yeah. Or like not even knowing
your feelings for them.
Not even knowing what she wanted to do after college. She was like, I don't think I'll have a job. She's like, who does this age?
Yeah. Oh my god. Right now, specifically right now, does anyone have a job?
Who knows? Say? Really, who knows?
Who is to say?
So very normal stuff.
Yeah. Right.
But like, so okay, well, moving on, like, so Frances, she starts developing those feelings for Nick, and it gets to a point where Melissa ends up inviting them to a summer house in France where they're staying, so they can all hang out together. And it's kind of there where they see like Melissa's worst sides come out. Like, you know, like there's a part where the owner of the house comes to visit, and like Melissa turns into this monster who's like ordering everyone around, and she's being condescending to everyone for not doing what she wants. And meanwhile, on the side, Frances and Nick are just like carrying out their affair. And like, you know, like Frances almost wants to have like this kind of, not really voyeuristic, but like she wants Nick to admit that he wants only her while they're together in the water and everyone's there in the beach. So it gets like really like, it gets kind of dangerous. But towards
because okay, sorry, did we when because in that moment when they're on vacation with everyone, it like becomes more clear to literally everyone there that Nick is attracted to her. But like, you know, because we're like so in her head, she doesn't see that. Like, she doesn't get it. But like, everyone clearly does, and you find that out later through Bobby and Melissa,
right?
And I guess Evelyn, their other friend Evelyn.
Their other friend.
That everyone knows that Nick is attracted to her.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
The fact that she was so, again, in her head and like not really focusing on like the now. Yeah. You know, and just thinking about like stuff she thinks is currently true. She's not trying to figure it out for herself.
Right.
If that makes sense. Like she's basing it off Nick only.
And this is all
which
to
is
say,
not necessarily bad.
Right, and this is also all to say that Sally Rooney has such great control of the first person perspective here, because like as someone, as a writer myself, like the idea of how much control you have over the information that exists outside of that perspective, like what's going on in other people's heads and when to reveal it and how to reveal it, it doesn't feel super forced or contrived. Like, she learns about it very naturally, I think.
Right.
But anyway, this goes on until the end of the trip, when Bobby goes looking for Frances, and she realizes that Frances is in Nick's room. And that's how she discovers, like, oh, okay, they've been together this whole time. And she's, like, processing that.
She asks Frances, like,
oh, that's true.
And Frances tells her, but, like, you know...
Like, she's teasing her about it. Right, she's teasing her about it.
Yeah, okay. Can I just say that, like, throughout the vacation, there were really super cringy moments.
Yeah.
When Bobby was super trying to push it. And you can, like, push them together, or, like, push one of them to admit that they have feelings for each other.
There's
or
that
that
scene,
they're attracted to each other.
There's that scene where they're playing what's essentially Henyo.
Pinoy Henyo. Yeah. Pinoy Henyo. Or like they're playing like a guessing game, which I actually don't know what the English word for.
Yeah, it's so weird. Like, she had to describe the rules of the game.
Yeah,
and my note was, so it's Henyo. You could have just said
me too. I literally was like, okay, so this entire paragraph, if written by a Filipino Filipino. If it was written by a Filipino, it would just be one sentence. That's it. So basically, they had to play Pinoy Henyo, and they had to get these names in a basket or whatever, and then the other person had to guess, right, who the person is on the paper. And it was Bobby's turn to guess, and she had drawn up Frances's name, and Nick had to be the one to like make Bobby guess, and Nick got really uncomfortable really fast because Bobby would ask increasingly specific questions, like, are you attracted to this person? Is this person young? Like a baby? No, not a baby. So like college, like a young adult. And it was really like, I literally was like, Bobby, can you get a fucking grip?
Yeah, nobody.
And literally, Frances even makes it like takes note of like how everyone is quiet. Like she really was like, nobody was moving, nobody was even drinking anymore. The air was clearly very different, and Bobby was the only one who could not tell. And like she would say stuff like, "Are you attracted to this person?" And then eventually the one that made Nick break was like, she said, "Do you think this person is like really hot in a bikini or something like that?" And Nick was like, "Oh, Jesus Christ!" Like he really was like, "Jesus, everyone knows that it's Frances, okay? Like give it up." And then Bobby was like, and everyone was just so uncomfortable. It was crazy. And
so that's a facet of Bobby's character that is kind of like consistent throughout the entire book, because like even later on, like at least during that game, she was like super drunk, I think. But then later on, there's also that part
sober.
Yeah, because later on, there's that scene where they're talking with their friends, and then she starts getting into this really heated argument for polygamy. That ends up insulting like the person who's entering the group at the time, so she makes her feel
like
unwelcome.
She's like a new super, and I remember super like anytime she has to speak. Generally, I do cringe. I mean, obviously, I feel bad for her in terms of like her life and like her relationship with Frances, but then also parang
But that's also the thing like, where I think
the
if
whole
she
time
had
I really
written
was like,
from the other perspective of Bobby, like it might have been, she might have been able to paint her out as being sympathetic in that regard. Like she would have been able to explain away
absolutely
like this behavior.
Yeah. No, and that's what makes it interesting. Like if this was a book via Bobby's POV, Frances would probably look like a really dishonest, shitty person. Yeah. But like and like something that I did take note of is that like Sally is so good at writing people who don't fucking know how to talk to each other. Like literally holy shit. Like there were so many things that Frances said, like parang, this is how I felt, but I didn't say it. And you're kind of just like, why didn't you fucking say it? Yeah. It would be really helpful in this literal like situation if you had said that very specific thing. Like there were some moments where she did say stuff like, I thought about making this kind of joke, but I knew he wouldn't appreciate it. That's fine. But something that's like, I wanted to tell him that I was like really deeply in love with him and I was concerned for his well-being, but I didn't. And you're just like, oh, come on, man. And then the next line after that is Nick literally being like, I really find you so cold. Or like, I can't tell what you want from me. You're like so dishonest.
Even early on, like early on, I noticed it right away. There was a part when she was talking about convent school, and Frances was like saying, "Yeah, I went to convent school," and then Bobby kind of corrects her, "We went to convent school."
Right.
And they're talking to Melissa at the time, so I think she was like clearly trying to impress her by like emphasizing that aspect, like, yeah, I went to convent school. And then Bobby's like, we both went to convent school. What are you talking about?
Like we literally were like each other's only friend.
So Frances, after they get back from the trip, Frances ends up staying with her mother for a while, and then she winds up in the hospital because she starts experiencing. Well, she has been experiencing.
Well, she had been. She had been experiencing symptoms. Pain.
Yeah, pain, and then like what really like sets it off is that there's like some discharge of blood and like flesh, like fleshy mass.
No, not flesh. It's like it's like a blood clot. Essentially.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. As a woman, yes, as a woman.
Yes, please.
No, but like when these scenes started happening, I already kind of knew. I really was like, oh, she has PCOS. In my head, I was like, oh, come on, Pico's representation. But then, like, obviously, towards the end of it, you find out what her real diagnosis is, and it's not
Yes.
PCOS. I will say it's not PCOS.
Okay.
But I will say that I like I felt like weirdly excited to have like PCOS representation. Like, I was like,
we need to write more about PCOS.
talk
We need
about,
the great
how we're like
PCOS novel.
99%. Yeah. Yeah, we really did, and this is it. No, but like, okay, so one of the reasons why I did also kind of think it might have been PCOS, not to say that I'm a doctor or anything, but I do have PCOS.
Not a doctor.
I am diagnosed with PCOS, and I do take and yeah, I'm not a doctor. But I am diagnosed with it. I do take medication for it, and like a lot of the symptoms between what she is eventually diagnosed with and PCOS are actually similar, so that's why I thought it was PCOS. But like in the moments where she does have her sort of health breakdowns, quote unquote breakdowns, or like when it suddenly overwhelms her, like the pain is there, she bleeds out, she passes out, she feels feverish, she's in a cold sweat. All those things happen in extremely stressful situations.
Yeah. And
not the most stressful, but like it's like how do you say, like in Tagalog you'd say like parang napupuno siya, like she gets to the breaking point almost, and then her body just completely crashes, and that's part of it, because like stress levels and anxiety levels are a huge part of what like affects your hormones and stuff.
Meanwhile, in my dumb brain, in my dumb male brain, I thought like, oh no, is she pregnant? And did she have
that's
a
fair, because they do think that.
They do think that at first. That's the first thing they check. They cross it off. Like, okay, I'm
and
dumb.
That's a fair, no, because that's a fair assumption to make, because the fact that she says that the second time she bled out, the stuff that came out was something that never happened to her before.
Right.
And for me, I kind of was like, oh, that happens to me all the time, lady. What are you talking about? But then, they realize that it's not exactly normal, and it's chronic. And then, oh my god, I totally forgot what the sickness is called. But start with it.
It's called endometriosis. I wrote it down.
Yeah. Thank
to
you.
learn.
So it is. I did see it. After like her diagnosis in the book, I googled it also, because I was like, how is this different from PCOS? And someone had made a Venn diagram of PCOS and
endometriosis.
Sorry, thank you. And yun nga, and so that kind of explains a lot of things also for me, like as a girl, because like, there are parts in the novel where she is extremely frustrating as a person, and and Nick calls her out for it at one point, and just like he says, just because you feel a certain way at one point doesn't mean you can lash out at me. And I would be so frustrated when she would do those things, but then right after that, like for example, that time that he called her out and said, you can't just say these things and then leave and think that you're right. Afterwards, she has that like episode, like she passes out, I think.
Yeah.
And no, not really. Like she gets really stressed and she bleeds out again, and then
right.
And
then coming straight from the hospital.
And then like I get that like it might be a hormonal thing.
Yeah.
Like, eventually it's like, oh, she probably was feeling so much.
Yeah.
And just didn't realize it. And I super understand that.
Yeah, coming from the hospital, she only decides to tell Bobby about it. And like the ultrasound is still months away, so she doesn't even really know that it's endometriosis.
Which I don't understand, by the way.
Right.
That was weird for me. Sorry.
I can't say anything about it. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. But for me, like when I was diagnosed with PCOS, I had an ultrasound right away. Like I went to my doctor and then I was like, I'm experiencing these things and I have a feeling it's PCOS. And he was like, oh, we can get you an ultrasound like right now. And part of me is like, is it just because like the Irish NHS was? I'm just kidding. I don't know if Ireland has.
Right. If you're listening and you know the answer, please do let us know.
You can let us know, because like, it was really
we looked up.
Yeah. It was kind of troubling to me that her ultrasound was so far away.
Yeah.
Not to say that I don't think that Sally was like incorrect about it, but like it stressed me out. Like as a woman, that super stressed me out. Like I really was like, I want to know these. Well, Frances maybe as a person wouldn't want to know right away. Like she eventually when she has the ultrasound, she doesn't even tell her mom. You're right.
Yeah,
like, she tells only Bobby.
That's right.
And then Bobby is the one who has to tell Nick. She doesn't tell Nick. And then but like when the novel ends, her mom still doesn't know that she has a chronic illness.
Well, like, okay, we'll get to that in a bit. But like basically, what we're skipping over is like Bobby moves in with Frances, kind of just like because she's looking for a place to stay, And meanwhile, like Frances
Right.
starts writing because she hasn't been writing for a while. And so she starts writing what ends up being her first short story, and it's about Bobby. It's basically a thinly veiled fiction about Bobby. And then she kind of spitefully sends it over to Valerie, who is a friend of Nick and Melissa, whom Frances does not
Nick and Melissa
like.
don't even like.
Yeah, nobody
Frances,
likes
yeah, I was
Valerie.
gonna say, nobody
Frances
likes
clearly doesn't
Valerie,
like her.
Yes, Valerie is like an older woman. Like she,
Yeah.
if you have read Pride and Prejudice, she is almost the Catherine de Bourgh.
Yeah.
Because like she like Melissa admits at one point that like the only reason why she's so respectful and like what do you call this, like welcoming to Valerie despite her own feelings is because she knows that she can't get work without Valerie.
Yeah.
And that's like an important thing to remember
Right.
once
So
you
that- yeah.
realize that like even if like they have a scene where Frances kind of stands up to Valerie for saying really passive aggressive
Yeah, this is over when they were in
microaggression
France.
things.
When they were in France,
Yeah,
like
when they
she
were in
kind of
France
walks
about
out on
Nick.
her.
Yeah, because she said something kind of mean and like
Yeah.
judgmental about Nick that Frances couldn't handle.
Yeah.
And so she left. But then eventually a couple days later, Valerie reaches out to Frances and says, if you have any work of yours that you want
Yeah,
me to read,
this
I
is
will
kind
take a
of
look. I
like
will
her
willingly take a look of
peace,
it.
like the sort of her peaceful
Like her
gesture.
olive branch.
Yeah, her olive branch to
Yeah.
kind of like reconcile. But like Frances sends its story kind of spitefully. Like she doesn't even edit it, which we're gonna get to in a bit. But like she doesn't even edit
Yeah.
it. She sends the first draft of this story, and she's just like whatever. And then she ends up having a fight with Nick over her loving him and him not reciprocating. And then that's when she passes out. And then when Bobby kind of brings her back home, and then Nick asks if he can come over, that's when he finds out about her trip to the hospital. And then that's when they
Right.
reconcile as well. Which, by the way, like when they kind of, that scene where they're both in the bathroom and they're kind of like making up, that's when I thought, like, okay, this seems like the part where the novel's about to reach its end point. But not so fast.
It doesn't.
There's
It
so many
super
things that
stretches
happen
out
after.
pa.
Yeah.
And that's so true. Like I only realized that now that would have been a great ending.
Yeah.
So to
But
speak.
I don't
But
know if that's
then-
coming
not
from
great,
the fact
but like that would have
that we experience normal people first, and that ending sort
Right.
of happens in normal people. But that's obviously
Yeah.
for another episode, so we're gonna get there eventually.
Yeah.
But a few things happen after that. Like Melissa finds out about Frances' affair with Nick because Nick tells her, right? And she
Yeah.
ends up sending.
Which is a thing that he had been planning to do. Like
Right.
that's
Right.
kind of important to know.
Yeah, and she sends Frances like this really lengthy email where
Yeah,
she
it was like 3 pages
Yeah,
in the book.
My God,
Like-
like in my notes, like I was like, she's talking about this. There is so much
Yeah.
to unpack here. Like I literally,
Literally, there's so much.
Yeah, like-
but like Frances does make a point after reading the email where she says, "Na, she wonders if it was just like the street, like what's her Melissa's stream of consciousness,
yeah,
or like a burst of emotion, or did she like write everything and then go back to edit it?
yeah. Because I didn't
But
know.
either way, it was crazy.
Right, because I didn't know whether to feel bad for Melissa or not after reading that email. Like, obviously, like there's a part of it where she's
Yeah.
speaking from her anger, but then there's another part of
Yeah.
it where it's
Where
like,
she says like really mean things.
yeah, and like
not
she,
even about Frances.
and she
but
kind of like
about Nick.
references her past affair in a way that's like, oh, that wasn't really called for. You didn't have to say that.
Yeah.
Or
like
she says mean things about Nick.
Or when she, yeah, and yun nga, like when she talks about her affairs, she makes it sound like, well, kasi naman Nick was being like this eh.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, she
Did
puts
you
the
feel that
blame
also?
on. She
Because,
puts the blame on Nick.
she-
She puts the blame on Nick
Yeah,
for
like, she
her
was
for
like,
her
he was
affair.
he
It's
was-
like, come on.
Yeah, like she was like, because she couldn't handle his mental state.
Right, that's something we
'Cause
haven't mentioned,
he-
by the way. We haven't mentioned
Yeah,
yet
yeah,
that
yeah,
he
sorry.
has also
So,
been suffering
in
from
France-
depression.
Yeah, he's depressed, and in France there was apparently an episode with Valerie that
Yeah.
they never really discussed, but like it's mentioned. And then in that email, that's the first time Frances learns that Nick had actually been in not an institution, but like he
Like
had been
he was in care.
put in the hospital.
He was being
Yeah,
treated
he was
for
in
it.
care for a specific amount of time.
And
a
we
year
basically find out
or
as
so
well
ago.
that during his time at the
That
facility, that was when Melissa had gotten into her affair with the best friend.
Yeah, exactly. So. And yun. So that's kind of why you're right. Like the email is very confusing because you're like, okay, clearly she's super hurt because Nick and Francis had both lied to her face because she had asked them in person if they were sleeping together. But then
and all
both
these
said no at the time.
All these resentments are coming out where like Nick wanted to have children but she didn't, and now they're getting older. Eventually. And then like after their affair,
it's also worth noting that like Nick has a niece that he
loves his niece,
enchanted by. He would die for this niece. Like it's very clear. Like it was very clear to me at least. Like the only times I felt a glow with Nick was when the niece was there.
Right.
Does that make sense? Like I felt
absolutely.
The glow of him jumping out from the pages was when even in his birthday party when the niece showed up for like a while with his sister. He was drunk out of his mind, but he was completely changed as soon as, even if he was drunk, he was like, obviously he wasn't like, I'm not gonna hold her because I'm drunk, but like he very clearly seemed like a different person.
Right.
And as soon as they left, he was back to being like very sad about life.
So from there, like Frances becomes like increasingly broke because she gets her allowance from her dad, but her dad hasn't been sending her money, which she starts panicking over. And like eventually like she hesitates to tell Nick about it, but when she does, Nick starts loaning out some money to her. After that, she then gets an email from a literary journal editor who says that Valerie forwarded the story to her and he wants to publish her story. And like, okay, like sidebar, I've talked to you about this like outside, but like reading about this offer that the editor came to her with, it was sort of like, as someone who is a professional writer himself, like I couldn't help but feel like, oh man, sometimes some other people have it so much easier. Because she pointedly says like this is the first draft of her first ever story. She sends it off to Valerie.
Because she was writing primarily poems before. And like can I just like mention a bit the difference between how she would describe like writing poems and like how she was writing this story? Because like I really remember there was a scene where like when she was about to first be invited, or like one of the first times that she was gonna be invited to Melissa's house, she was in the middle of writing, and then she mentioned like I clicked the enter key anytime I wanted, and that's how you were like, oh yeah, I know she's writing poetry. And then when she was writing this story, she was like, I realized I was writing a sentence.
Like all her feelings came out like straightforward. And so it's the first draft of the story, her first ever story, she says. And like right away, the journal editor is like, yes, we want to publish it, but also we want to offer you some money for it. And she specifies the amount, which is 800 euro, which I mean, like, for me as a Filipino writer, when I plug that amount into the exchange rate calculator, the tears that came out of my eye, it's stressful, man.
Me too.
It's
like
rough.
As a creative in general,
so
you're just like, oh. And like suddenly she was like, I'm not gonna be poor. Like she's
like, I'm going to pay back Nick for the loan.
No. Like what she said, because Nick lends her like, if I'm not mistaken,
like 200
euros.
Yeah.
And around 200 euros, which is also a lot of money, but like Nick also comes from a wealthy family, and he was like, it's nothing. And she says, but to him it really probably wasn't. And then when she gets that offer and she gets the offer and she's like, okay, it's gonna eventually come. She said something that was like when I say yes to this offer, and even when I get it and I'm able to pay Nick back, I'll still have so much money. I was like, no.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, man. So, what the important thing about this scene though is that she says yes to the editor without really telling Bobby about it. And like kind of her
Right.
justification for it is that, well, Bobby would understand, like, this is from my perspective, so it's not really about her, it's about my
Yeah.
perspective of her. Something like that. She finds a way to reason around not telling Bobby. Although there's an
Yeah.
underlying implication that she's just scared to tell Bobby, which she should be, because she should tell Bobby about the whole thing,
Yeah. And
right?
like eventually too, like when she asks Nick for advice about it,
Yeah, Nick is
um
like, you should tell her.
Nick is like, you should really tell her.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that like we should kind of praise Nick for as a person, because and Francis does kind of mention this sometimes too, that like despite everything, even if Melissa has called him useless
Yeah.
and like has really railed on him and his mental, health, he is very genuinely concerned about everyone.
Right.
And even if he also says stuff like, I don't think my advice will help, eventually you realize his advice is super good. Like when he
Yeah.
says it,
Yeah, he's
you're
not
you're
that
like,
bad.
yeah,
He's not
he
a bad
said
guy.
the right thing. Like, yeah, like he knows what he's talking about. And but like, he's one of those guys that goes like, that says, I really think you should tell her because it's gonna hurt your feelings.
Yeah.
Or I don't know. Like
Like,
that's how he says it.
like
And
he's
you're
the
kind of
guy.
just like, no, dude, you're right. Yeah.
Exactly. He's the kind of guy, like, by the end, I was like, oh, this guy definitely has some demons. He's complicated, but I respect him. I
Yes.
clearly respect this guy.
Yeah, he's trying, because you can see.
Yeah, he's
even
trying.
when
He's
Francis-
trying. Yeah.
He's trying so hard. Even when Francis and Melissa are both super pissed with him,
Right.
you can. He also has that enough self awareness to be all like, okay, I fucked up. How do I say sorry?
Yes.
And Melissa on her bit, on like her side naman, she doesn't appreciate that because she
Yeah.
sees it. And she says this in that super 10-page email. She says that she finds that she like reads it as Nick being like walkable. I mean, like it's so easy to walk all over him.
Yeah.
Which,
It makes
like,
it easy to,
you
like,
know,
pass the
that's-
blame onto her, which is like,
Yeah,
I mean,
which is like so unfair also. 'Cause it's like, I
Yeah.
mean, between the two of you, who's like, I mean, like, I don't want to judge Melissa's own mental health because clearly she has stress issues.
Yes.
Rin.
Yeah, absolutely.
But like, she wasn't put in like care in like a facility for
Right.
something, and she made situations worse. And
Yeah.
I don't know, like, also the fact that like she admits that when Francis came along and Nick and Francis started sleeping with each other, that like their marriage got kind of better almost.
Yeah.
And that kind of like tells you something about the two of them, Rin, because it's like,
Right. Yeah, there's a
Like-
point they make where it's like you almost feel like this is the arrangement that Nick and Melissa have to pursue in order to have a good relationship, is they just need to keep having affairs to compete for each other's attention.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's a thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she basically says yes to this editor to publish her story, and then at the same time, like, that's when Bobby has that conversation with Frances where she's like, yeah, my parents are still going through their divorce and it's really bad now and I want to
Yeah.
get out of it.
Yeah.
And she
Yeah.
basically, what happens after that is they kiss.
Right.
So basically, following that, Melissa sends Frances' story to Bobby, and that's how Bobby learns about the story.
Mhm.
And that's what causes Bobby to leave their apartment. And then at the same
Right.
time, like, Frances is getting like all these ominous calls from her dad, and they're very like disconcerting. Where he's just calling in and he's like saying, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm sorry," but he's not like explaining where he is, and
Yeah.
she's been trying to get
He
back
also
to him.
says stuff like, but then he's clearly outside also. Like she
Yeah.
does mention that. Like it's like he's clearly not in the house.
Yeah.
And then sorry, before that call, she also has like such a traumatizing visit to his house, because like she walks over to his house and it's filthy. Like during the first scene we have of Frances in her dad's house, she clearly just cleans up. Like they don't talk, they have
Yeah.
dinner, she cleans the kitchen and then she leaves. That's basically it.
Yeah.
And then when she goes to visit him after France, he also calls her while they're in France.
Right.
He kind of
Like,
forgets that she's in France.
but then he
and-
also like talks her down for like not saving money, which is like,
Yeah, and she's kind of like,
uh-oh.
okay.
Yeah.
And then so after that, when she comes home and he calls her, and then she comes home, she comes home, she goes to his house, and it's like filthy, it's disgusting, like it's so graphic the way that Sally describes how gross the house is, because it's like half eaten, like takeout is just rotting, like several, like what do you call it, like she said, stages of decay, parang ganon. And like the fridge had like maggots, and then like one jar of something was clearly bubbling because it was gonna explode because it's so expired probably. And then after that she just left.
Right.
And at that point I was like, oh my god, the dad's dead, like he's probably gonna kill himself or something.
Yeah, so
like,
that
I really thought
that's happening.
So yeah.
And then like Frances also has the ultrasound, and that's when she learns about her endometriosis, and that kind of prompts her to reassess her relationships, particularly with Nick. Like she doesn't tell him about what she has, and he ends up misinterpreting her behavior as her wanting him to leave Melissa, and the result of that is they break up. They basically break up. They have very sad sex, and then they break up. So following that, she ends up working a job at a sandwich shop. Nick and Melissa seem to grow closer together meanwhile, which is what she's able to piece together from like looking at videos of them on Facebook. And like Frances kind of has this sort of epiphany where she goes to a church. Like we haven't mentioned that all the while, ever since she got back from France, she's been reading the Bible. She's gone back to the Bible.
She went back to the Bible. I know, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, oh my gosh, she went back to the Bible.
Yeah.
But not necessarily like
she doesn't turn religious.
Believed in it.
Yeah, but like she kind of like turns to it.
A sense of comfort, which honestly I super understand. Like I get that. Like I'm also not a religious person, as you know, but I do get that parang something from your past, or like your upbringing could like help kind of ground you, I guess, because that's what it seemed like was happening. And especially she also notes that like as she reads it, one of the ways that she like gets into it is that she imagines Jesus as Bobby as Jesus. Yeah. She even says the Jesus character.
All right.
I really was like, okay, let's maybe.
So she's at this church, and then she has this epiphany about herself, which, like, from what I recall, like, she basically started, like, becoming sort of super conscious about her surroundings. Like, she started to think about the pew that she was on, and, like, who made this pew? Who brought it here? Where did it come from? So and she kind of, like, related it to herself. Like, who are the people who made me? Where do I come from? Where do I remain? Like, all these things. And, I mean, like, whereas you're not that religious, I'm kind of pretty much religious. Like I kind of like recognize that like she's having like an examination of conscience. Like she's like figuring herself out, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of gives her.
I wanna. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Go
no,
on.
I just wanted to say that parang like going back to what we were saying, that she's self-aware, but like based on like only based on her realizations with her like in terms of like her relationships with other people, whereas in that moment in the church when she's going through that, like as you said, examination of conscience, it's very much like obviously she still says like, okay, where do I come from, but then it's not in the sense that it's like this is my relationship with that thing or this person that I come from. It's like, what has that done to me already, you know? Like it's correct to call it an examination of conscience. Like it was super good. Like because this is like, I super loved it.
My sense is that this is like sort of the underlying theme that has been running throughout the whole book, which is that this book is not just about Frances' relationships with these three other people or with her parents, but it's also about her relationship with herself and like making sense of, like, she would say things like, especially after she had found out about her endometriosis, where like she felt like she was disappearing without the validation that she was getting from Nick or Bobby. And there were times where Bobby would even flat out ignore Frances, and she'd feel like she was disappearing.
Yes.
Whereas like here, it's like she starts to realize like, no, I just am. I don't have to think about the qualifiers.
Is this part in the church? Do you remember? Do you remember if this scene in the church is before or after the time that the second time that she like actually hurts herself? Because throughout the novel she does she's going through self-harm. Like like she,
but the thing in the church is towards the end.
Right. Okay. So I'm thinking that's after, because there's a part where she does like think about she throughout the first half of the novel, she's always like saying random things like I want to punch myself in the gut, or
Right.
like
Right.
I just want to scratch myself until I bleed, and then she eventually does that. And then there's also a part where she like cuts, like
Yeah, very
literally
graphically.
like
Like,
cuts
ugh.
her.
Oh boy.
Yeah, sorry, but like she does self harm, and that was more like graphic than the first one.
Yeah.
And then like towards this, it's kind of when she's finally realizing like, oh, because it's one of those things where it's like she just needs to do it so she can feel
Yeah,
something,
because like
because it's
like
very clear like throughout the whole thing she's not
like
sure
in
what
terms of
she's
her
feeling,
interior,
or
or
if
like
she
it's more like in terms of her interior, she feels like pain in her interior, and she wants her body to kind of reflect the pain that she feels inside.
yeah,
Yeah.
right, yeah, and then she also has that part where like when she's bleeding out again because of her disease, she kind of was just like, whatever, people die like this all the time, I might as well die. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, girl.
Yeah.
And also when she cuts herself open, kind of, she also like, if I remember correctly, she says something that's like, if this drains me out, that's fine too. Like, so it's one of those like really passive things that was really like, I was really like, this is so dark and really sad. And that's something about Sally that like I kind of appreciate, that she's kind of like she does this in Normal People as well with like Paul's character. What's his name again? Sorry, Connor.
Connell.
Like,
Connell.
because doesn't he has like a Connell? Sorry. Oh my god, I'm racist. I just
Anyway.
he has also like a really depressive like episode in Normal People that like that isn't just like surface level. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like all these parts about Frances were like very emotional and dark and like very hard to read because you felt so sad for her. And then when you get to that part in the church, like I really felt like revived with
Yeah,
her.
like she was coming around to this idea that okay,
Yeah.
maybe I really don't need the validation of others to know who I am, or to get a sense of
Yeah.
myself, which is
Yeah.
great. And
Yeah.
that kind of gives her the confidence. Like after she leaves the church, she passes out, and then when she comes
Yeah.
to, she leaves the church, and then she like confronts Melissa over the phone about it, and then she also
Which,
writes.
okay, was an amazing
Yeah.
phone call.
Yeah.
Like in the beginning I was like, why are you doing this? But then like as
Yeah,
it
she's
goes
like
on,
eating
I
cake
really,
also.
yeah, like super chill, like it's a
Yeah.
Thursday. But then the like the words they're saying to each other are not chill.
Yeah.
Like both of them have zero fucking chill. Like when she tells Melissa like when Melissa was like she said something. I was like, why did you send my story to Bobby? And then Melissa goes, I don't know, why did you fuck my husband? and then when what's her name, when Frances is like, okay, great, you can swear, you have totally proven that you were an adult that can
You
swear.
are brave.
So, yeah, that's literally, hooray, you are brave. Like that's what she does. That had to be one of the most comical parts of the book.
Yeah.
Honestly, like this book, okay, that's the thing about this book also. It's not funny. Not in a bad way, but like there is nothing that's usually funny about it, you know?
Yeah.
But that part made me go, ha! You know, like I really was like, okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's a
So she comes from there, like she confronts Melissa, she has a whole conversation, and then she writes an apology email to Bobby, which causes Bobby to return. And from there, they basically start seeing each other again. They get together, but they do this thing where they're not trying to define it as a relationship. Like everyone around them is like, yeah, you guys are clearly together again. But she's like, do we really have to be? And that's where they have that line, what is a conversation?
What is
a friend?
No, it's like, what is a friend? What is a conversation?
Right? Like, and I mean, like, I can see where the book is coming from to say, like, if you don't think about it, if you just let it happen, and if you just let friends make each other happy, then that's what should work. Like, don't get so enmeshed or entrenched in the process of defining what things are and figuring out what the boundaries are. Although, like, you can sort of sense, like, that's kind of not really a crutch, but the thing that she needs to kind of grow into someone more mature. right?
Yeah,
Like she
absolutely.
starts setting boundaries to help her manage her experience with her disorder. Like she decides
Mm-hmm.
like I'm not really going to tell anyone about it. And she doesn't tell Bobby about it even though they're quote unquote together.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what leads into the sort of ending scene of the novel where she gets an accidental call from Nick.
Which,
And they
okay, another funny moment. Two
yeah,
funny moments in this entire like novel, and it's at the end. But yeah, when she calls Nick, I mean,
yeah.
sorry, no, she doesn't call Nick. Sorry,
She gets
like
a call from Nick. Nick
she's
thinks that
literally
he's
just
calling Melissa.
Melissa, yeah, and
Yeah.
he's really like, hey, sorry, there's no like red or what does he say? There's only red or
Or
yellow
like yeah, they're
peppers.
like peppers. Yeah, he's in the
Yeah, yeah,
supermarket, and
and
she kind of
she's like,
uses that.
oh,
She kind of uses that
sorry.
opportunity to ask him for advice about, hey, should I tell Bobby about this? Like she gets him up to speed, and then she's like, should I
Yeah,
tell Bobby about my disorder? And that's also her way
yeah,
of telling him about it too. Which
yeah,
I can understand. Like that's a smart way of like taking the pressure off of her to be like, hey, this I have this by the way. Instead, she's
yeah,
like, hey, should I tell Bobby that this is what happened to me? Right,
yeah,
which is like I think that's a step up from like how she was pressured to tell him things before.
yeah.
uh and they basically reconcile about each other from that. Like he
Yeah.
tells her about how he's really felt like
Hmm.
since they were on the beach or like the
Which is
time of their first
amazing.
kiss.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Like literally, okay, that entire conversation is as again, like going back to what I said earlier, that like Sally is so good at writing people who don't know how to talk to each other.
Hmm.
And then at the last fucking moment, when everything like when it's really towards the end of this already and you don't really realize it, they have the greatest conversation of life.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's
They
such
they
a
have the
the
conversation
conversation with
with the
friends.
friend.
Exactly, exactly. Like it was it was the greatest slow burn
Yeah,
of all time. Like
yeah.
to finally be like, oh my god, they did
and
it.
and so
Thank God.
basically the novel ends with him saying like, hey, from the moment you first kissed me at that house party, I kind of
Yeah.
wanted you to already sleep with me. And that's like the thing she's been wanting to hear all along. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
and
I
and
have wanted you this whole time.
she's eventually like, okay, you can come and get me, here's where I am.
Yeah,
And that's where
yeah,
the book ends. So it's like sort
yeah.
of implied that they also get together and that they
Yes.
enter into that again necessarily complex relationship. So
Yeah,
that's a whole thing.
I know.
So that's conversations with friends. Now, like in terms of like understanding, like the question that we posed earlier at the beginning of the episode, like, is this a book that's necessarily timely, or is this a book that
Right.
can kind of function outside of the millennial label? Because like, okay, like you mentioned it earlier, like you brought it up earlier, you made a reference to Jane Austen, and you're the Jane Austen expert between the two of us. You're the Regency
Right.
era expert between the
Yeah.
two of us. Like, does this how does this novel stack up, like compared and contrast to those
Oh,
novels?
to
Like,
like to Jane Austen. Okay,
right,
if
because
we're
like
gonna
there's a lot
use
about
Jane Austen
manners, right?
specifically, yes. So that kind of I would say that it would hold up in that sense because I mean like it would hold up against like Jane Austen in that sense because I'm gonna relate this to what I was saying earlier also about us being not from the Western world, but we had consumed a lot of Western media and we studied Western works in university. But like the reason why I really love Jane Austen and a lot of people still really love Jane Austen and we study it her work still is because like even if her work is so clearly like from a different time, there the like thematically it's still the same shit, you know, like
Yeah,
she like there's parts where she's talking about like the economy and like the struggles of like
yeah,
women because of the economy and vice versa, and even if there's some stuff about like propriety that like doesn't hold up now, some of those expectations from that time are still expected of like us now. So that kind of like makes sense as to why we still like watching the revivals of them when they're turned into films, or like that's why
right,
it's okay to still study them at school.
right.
And then in terms of like conversations with friends, uh the thing about Sally is that she's not necessarily writing about something particularly Irish. even if all the spaces are clearly Irish, like when she's like, yeah, I was over in college, or like I was green whatever, like I don't, sorry, that was a really bad accent, sorry. Like no, but like she would really name
I don't
these
know,
places.
we're gonna cut that out.
Yeah, sorry, but like when she was naming these places, obviously if we were from that her area, and like I don't even know if those are real places, but like maybe they aren't, I don't know, I didn't check, but if they were, then obviously the book would be more relatable. But at the same time,
yeah,
knowing those places isn't the point.
yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
And so that's like you're not here because like you have seen France or you've been to Ireland, like
Right.
you understand what's going on with the book because like not necessarily because you've had the same situation as Francis. I kind of low-key hope not.
Right.
But it's more like her troubles and her stress as a young adult are still really universal. You know, like she's worried about where she's gonna get money for rent. She doesn't know how to navigate her feelings with this boy. She
Right.
is sort of also mentally like not okay. She
Yeah.
has a very womanly disease.
Yeah.
Like these are all very universal things.
Exactly. And I think to go on another level with that, like that was something that I was reading again in that Emily Temple article on LitHub, where she's sort of raising this question of like, I mean, like that's the reason I also brought up Jane Austen. It's not so much to say there's a necessary like comparison to make between them, but
Right.
the themes that Sally Rooney is writing about here have been timely. In as much as it's questions of what self am I supposed to be in front of another person.
Did you hear like the motorcycle?
It's fine. So
Okay.
what sort of self am I supposed to be? Or like how do I interfere with this relationship, or should I interfere with this relationship?
Yes.
You know, what are
Yeah.
these societal norms that I should either abide or subvert? Basically.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
You know, which are
And,
things
you
that
know,
we've seen since way back then.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. And the only difference is that in conversations with friends or in Sally's work in general, she can openly discuss those things already because
Right.
it's the 21st century. Whereas someone like Jane Austen, she could only allude to it, you know, like be all like,
Right.
"Ooh, I have a crush on this person who's clearly wealthy and I'm very poor, but what does
Yeah.
that mean for me?" And like, or like, oh, I don't want to, or like, for example, in Pride and Prejudice, where it's like I would only want to marry for love. Like, why would I marry for money? That's not a realistic thing. And then versus conversations with friends where they have literally, as we mentioned earlier, that whole 3-page discussion about polyamory, which
Yes.
like would have been so crazy to someone like Jane Austen would have had a heart attack if she said that. She was like, "Whoa,
Yeah,
listen, I'm just
yeah.
trying to
And
make
I think
a point
that's
about money
that's
here."
the thing. Like, there's one of the friends mentions like, "Hey, I know." Like at the end when they're like together but not girlfriends, where their friends like, "Hey, I know you're doing this sort of anarchist, non-definition thing, but
Yeah.
you know, to us, you're clearly girlfriends."
Mhm.
So that's sort of funny.
Yeah, Philip is annoying.
Yeah. So, okay, so we're now at the end of the podcast. Basically, we've kind of like boiled down this evaluation into, we're boiling it down into sort of a recommend or not recommend, very simple, clear cut.
Mhm.
Like you were saying that this is kind of like what bookstagrams do. You're more familiar with
Yes.
this than I am.
Yeah. So basically, okay, I just want to like tell people, whoever's listening, that one of the other inspirations for this besides blank check is bookstagrams, because I had considered, and I also gave Mio the suggestion.
Yeah, you were
that
telling me.
he
You were
should
telling
make
me
a,
I should do
yeah, I
that.
said that you should make a bookstagram or something because he reads a lot. Definitely Mio reads more than me, in terms of like physical novels and books in general.
Well, you read a lot
and-
too, but it's.
I mean, like I do.
you
but
read
like,
a lot.
Yeah,
It's fan fiction.
Yeah,
which is
I
not,
read a lot
which
of
is not
fanfic.
bad. Like,
Yeah,
like,
which is not bad.
That's a
It's
lot
not.
of reading too.
I read a lot of novel length fanfic. Okay, but
Yeah.
like, you know, I do. In terms of like, that's also one of the reasons why I wanted to get into this kind of podcast or even make a bookstagram, because
Mhm.
I wanted to like pressure myself to read more and like go back to how I was when we were in college.
Yeah.
But yeah, that being said, I did want like there to be a part of this that would discuss if we would recommend these books or not, because I think that's one of the greatest parts about following bookstagrams is that you can get like kind of real time reviews, you know, without having to like subscribe to like a
Right.
journal or a magazine for like books that like your peers like, you
Right.
know, because usually when you read like reviews online or like in a journal, that's like from really academic people sometimes,
Yeah.
and sometimes
Yeah.
you just want to know what your friends like,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to point out is that we want to also like dispel the notion, not to depower the critic as an
Oh,
authority,
absolutely.
but
Yeah, sorry,
like like
absolutely.
part of I think the premise that we have here is that we're trying to find out what people might consider accessible versus
Right,
what might not seem accessible, and then trying to find
right,
what's accessible in that inaccessible thing, right?
right.
So which is why it's also perfect that we're framing this as our own conversation, because then we're talking through these points and trying to make it seem, like through humor and whatever, to make
Yeah,
those opinions or those ideas about whether or not
yeah,
we'd recommend these books seem more
yeah,
accessible.
yeah.
That being said, would you recommend this book? Recommend, not recommend?
I Okay, can I just say first, I did mention this to you before we started recording that
Mhm.
I was very half and half with this book. I had told you while I was reading this that I was so frustrated.
Yeah.
At one point I do remember telling you that I cannot wait for this book to end because it was insanely, again, like I said this earlier, but it was like slow burn but not in a hot way. And like it was really frustrating because like all the characters are very frustrating because they did not talk to each other about their true feelings, and it was killing me. But once that got it over with at the end, I was kind of like, oh thank god. And I was very so about it. I was like, do I like this though? Like I was very unsure, but I think at the end of the day I still would really recommend it because I think that Sally is a very interesting writer. I don't know if somebody would learn something new from this.
Mhm.
Not to say that like it's not eye opening or something, but for me personally, it wasn't really. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Like I just mean that like it was it was it was frustrating to read in a challenging way, in a good challenging way,
Yeah.
but it was very difficult also. And I would recommend it to someone who would enjoy that.
Yeah.
Like honestly, while we were reading this, I was thinking of our friend Ariel, who also has a bookstagram.
Friend of the podcast.
She's a friend of and future maybe future guest. Who knows? She
We'll
doesn't even know
see.
this exists. Yes, we'll see. But like she is somebody who I really thought of while I was reading this because she is somebody who would enjoy that frustration in a
Yeah.
book. She's that kind of person. Whereas I really like things to be kind of straight to the point, and I kind of want to know what's going on. So yeah. So yeah, I think that if you're that kind of person who likes that and who finds like the drama, sort of mundane drama of everyday life,
Yeah.
to be interesting, then like you would like, maybe you should have a conversation with friends. I don't know.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
I would
What about you?
definitely recommend this book. And to the extent, like, I think it reveals a lot of things about the mindset of like people our age. So like I was saying, there are a lot of things that I relate to, but it's done in a way
Right.
that's quite subtle and very honest and realistic, which for me, those are nice things to check out. It's also like for readers from our kind of background, like there's a good opportunity for you to kind of get frustrated with people, but
Yeah.
also to find people respectable. And like, isn't that really all you want to look for in books? Like
Right.
people to kind of just like spend your time with, especially
Yeah.
now in our times,
Yeah. Yeah. And
So
these
I would recommend
crazy,
it.
crazy times. Yeah.
I would recommend
Oh. So in general, we would totally recommend this book.
it. Yeah.
Even but for totally different reasons. But like
Yeah.
still very recommendable book. Sally in general is, I don't know if we're gonna keep saying this throughout the series, but if we do, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But
Mhm.
like she is a very easy to get into writer.
She's
I
a
think
good writer. She's a good writer.
she is yeah, fantastic. Oh, okay. Something that I want to say also about her like
Mhm.
writing style that I kind of forgot to say earlier, but I'm just gonna put it in now. Is that like the whole time I was thinking that her writing style is very like stream of consciousness na hindi,
Yeah.
because like it's all, especially for this book, I think, because again we are very focused on like a singular point of view, and it's stuff that's more or less happening in quote unquote real time.
Yeah, there's a little more organization, I would say, than like
Yeah.
your conventional.
Yeah.
Like if you're gonna say stream of
Like,
consciousness,
this
like
is
Virginia,
millennials.
like Virginia Woolf is like really
Yeah.
like the benchmark, and like hers is
Right.
like really like every single thing that's gonna pass through my line
Her
of
brain.
vision or my line of thought is going to come
Yeah.
out in the text.
Yeah.
Whereas like this one is like very controlled. Like, okay, I'm gonna pick this to say, and that's gonna reveal something. I think there's a little more like functionality in what Sally Rooney chooses to put in or present in Francis' thoughts, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I agree.
Right. So I think this is a good time to now close the podcast, close the episode for now. And with that, we want to say thank you to all of you
Thank
for
you.
listening. Don't forget to
Whoever
rate,
you may be.
review, subscribe. Please, if
Subscribe,
you like
like,
this
if you can.
episode,
Yeah.
we've got more coming on
We
the
have-
way. You know, there's a
Yeah.
normal people episode coming up. We also have
Yep.
2 other mini-series that are
That we have
coming.
planned.
They're on the way. We've planned them out, and we hope that you stick with us for the journey.
Yeah.
Mandy, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me. Oh my god, I'm so sorry about this, everybody. All my usernames are really pretentious, but like on, but also very like book related. So if you know the references in my usernames, hit me up. On Twitter, you can find me at Laissez-Faire, LAISSEZFERRE. On Instagram, I am DELABISSE.
Okay, and on socials, I am at Mio Stark. But you could also go to my website, jmarceloborromeo.com,
like that.
for
Pew, 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 pew.
blog posts that are updated every Monday and Friday of the week.
Yeah,
along
he's
with
cooler
other
than me, guys.
writing.
He's got a blog post.
No,
I just
come
tweet
on.
memes.
You tweet memes and you go
And-
viral for them.
Yeah, that's true.
And I'm never gonna let that go.
Yeah.
So that's it. We're gonna talk about that some other time. That's
Maybe
another
someday.
conversation
Yeah,
for another day.
for another conversation with maybe more friends. But
So
yeah,
with
thank
that,
you guys for listening.
We thank you so much. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to The Rec Room. This episode was edited by me. Our artwork is by Mandy. Our theme song is 64 Sundays by Twin Musicom, which is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution License. Check out more of their music at www.twinmusicom.org. For more updates on The Rec Room, follow us on Instagram and Twitter at The Rec Room Pod. Rec spelled R-E-Q.